Does it make any sense for the Seattle Seahawks to extend Ken Walker before the 2025 season? What's going on, everybody? Good morning. Hope you guys are doing well on this Sunday. We've got some playoff football coming up here. Conference championship games. Have a good time with them. So, obviously, the Seahawks not involved. The Seahawks are involved in other things right now in the football world. And one of the things that they're involved in is figuring out which of their good young players they should extend coming out of the 2022 NFL draft. As I said yesterday, we have some decisions to make on players on this team that have been good and productive and generally shown they are capable of being contributing players in the NFL. Do you want to offer them a contract extension before the year starts? They are on the last year of their deal. Cross, we talked about Cross yesterday. He has the fifth-year option, but in the case of everybody else, they have 1 year left on their deal. And if you pay them now, you might save some money versus paying them later. There's a risk, there's a reward, and today we're going to be discussing the risk and reward with Kenneth Walker III, the running back. Second round pick from 2022. He's been productive, but it's been a little bit of a frustrating journey with Ken Walker. So much so that I think at this point most people are pretty on board with not giving him any money until after the 2025 season, and then we can make a decision. If he does very well in 2025, of course we would have to pay him more than if we paid him now. But I don't think there's a lot of interest in this one. Nevertheless, we should talk about it because Ken Walker is a good player. He's been productive in this league. And he has been a player that we have leaned on pretty heavily over his 3 years here when he's been healthy. And there is reason to believe he could be much better in a slightly better circumstance. But that doesn't necessarily mean we should just pay him now. 24 years old, and he's going to be 24 when the season starts in September. So still very young. Still got a lot left in him. But this remains a pretty difficult decision, I think. I think that paying him, committing long-term money to a running back is going to, at the very least, spark some PTSD. So let's talk about this. First, though, please click the thumbs up button on this video if you haven't already. Subscribe if you're new. Click the bell for notifications. Become a channel member for $2 a month. Those are the best ways to help support the channel. All right. So Ken Walker, let's first just look at how he's done so far in the NFL. So he's been in the league 3 years now. He has missed at least a couple games in every season of his career so far. He missed more than that in 2024. He missed 6 games, and it was like 3 separate injuries. So realistically, you can't say that his availability has been all that good. So that's going to have to factor into any kind of decision as well. He has been productive over the 3 years he's been here. He's averaged just shy of 1,100 yards per season from scrimmage. Gives you 8 to 9 touchdowns per season. He does not fumble. He's improved as a receiver in terms of his volume production with each year that's gone by. So I think that you are seeing some improvements in his abilities there. That being said, his production and his yards per touch have gone down with each year he's been in the league. Like, look at his yards per carry average. 4.6 to 4.1 to 3.7. Yards per touch, 4.8 to 4.7 to 4.4. Yards from scrimmage, over 1,200 to just over 1,150 to not even 900 this last year. So things are kind of going in the wrong direction in terms of his overall production, which is interesting because that first year, you'll remember, Rashad Penny started the year as the starting running back. Rashad Penny was the bell cow. Ken Walker was the spellback for the first several games of the year. Obviously, Penny got hurt quickly, but that's kind of that should still be a significant impact on Ken Walker's numbers, and we're not seeing that. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag. And I'll say this: he is a darling over at Pro Football Focus. He was one of the highest graded running backs in the league last year, 7th in the league, 88.4, really strong grade. You go back to the previous year, he was 7th again, graded a little lower, but still extremely high. So PFF has loved him. You go back to his rookie year, they thought he was just slightly above average, but still above average, which for a rookie is very notable. So Pro Football Focus is a big fan of what he brings to the table, and that's probably going to factor in a little bit as well. So there are a few different contrasting elements at play here when you're trying to determine Ken Walker's value. So looking at NFL contracts for running backs sorted by average annual value, there are going to be a lot of guys we're not even going to really look at here. Christian McCaffrey got an extension from the Niners last offseason. That's not really going to hold any relevance in this evaluation, right? I mean, Christian McCaffrey, just coming off a year where he almost won MVP. Of course, he's going to get paid at the top of the market. Guys like Saquon Barkley are not really going to be good comps because they're generational, theoretically. And also, Saquon was getting paid going from one team to another team. Alvin Kamara was 29 when he signed his extension. Josh Jacobs went from one team to another with his contract. So we're going to be skipping over a lot of these names. So trying to find reasonable comparisons for Kenneth Walker, there are a few names that I want to throw out there before we try to frame it in the terms of a good extension. I do want to start with Jonathan Taylor, although very quickly we'll see there's not much of an equivalency here. Jonathan Taylor signed his extension 2 years ago. It was 3 years, 42, so $14 million per year. And if you go to his stats page, you'll see that even though the third year was disappointing, he was far more productive and far better of a player than Ken Walker was. Much higher yards per carry average, a little bit more production as a receiver. He had an all-pro first-team season in 2021. He made the Pro Bowl, all-pro first team, almost won Offensive Player of the Year, over 2,000 yards, almost 2,200 yards. Much better player than Ken Walker, was considered to be maybe the best running back in the league when he got that extension. So quickly, Jonathan Taylor becomes somebody you just kind of take off the table here. Although it is worth noting that third year before he got his extension, he barely eclipsed 1,000 yards from scrimmage. So it's not completely out of bounds, but I don't think we're going to learn much here. So let's go down to the next name that I think is worth paying attention to when you're evaluating running back contracts for Ken Walker would be Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. Signed his extension when he was 26 years old. 4 years, $36 million. That's $9 million a year on average on the cap hit. So let's look at Ramondre Stevenson. He was a couple years older when he got his extension. Let's keep that in mind here. And his overall production over the first 3 years of his career was pretty similar. He did have slightly higher efficiency. Like if you were just to take the 3 years, just take the first 3 years, he was somewhat it's very similar. He was a little more efficient, but he also fumbled more, and he had fewer touchdowns. He averaged more yards per touch, but the overall production, you're in the same ballpark here, right? So Ramondre Stevenson, the difference is he did have his breakout year. It just didn't happen right before the contract. It happened in year 2, 2022. He had his big breakout year where he had almost 1,500 yards from scrimmage. Ken Walker never had that breakout 1,500 yard type season. So Ramondre Stevenson still probably a little bit further along in his ability to negotiate a contract extension than Ken Walker was. At the same time, if you look at Pro Football Focus, his final year before he signed the extension, they thought he was a little below average, actually. And then his breakout year, they didn't even think he was a top 10 running back. They thought he was really good, but not top 10 graded. And then his rookie year, they liked what they saw a lot, admittedly, 79.2. But Ken Walker is still more of a Pro Football Focus darling than Ramondre Stevenson. So also, Stevenson was a 4th-round pick. So Ramondre Stevenson is probably not quite the comp, but he's very close. I think when you look at this, and keep in mind, Stevenson didn't play in every game either. He missed 5 games in 2023, and he missed 5 games in 2021. So it's not like he was some picture of perfect health either. So realistically, we're not that far off already. We're already at $9 million a year on an extension, and we've already kind of hit the point where it's like, okay, that's not a bad comparison, especially because the cap keeps going up. Another guy that I think we need to take a look at here would be Chuba Hubbard So Chuba Hubbard, couple of notes here. He got extended midway through his 4th season, right? He got extended midway through season number 4. So there was a little bit more urgency to pay him when that time came up. But if you take a look at Chuba Hubbard, the age is similar. Chuba Hubbard was 25 when he got that extension. So you take a look at Chuba, a 4th-round pick like Stevenson, so little less draft pedigree than Ken Walker. But if you look at the first 3 years, which is mostly what he got paid off of, you have 2 years where he was a pretty good spellback, pretty capable backup running back, gave you about 800 yards in 2021, gave you about 600 in 2022. Probably would have gotten up close to about 800 if he had played every game. 2023 was kind of his breakout year. He had 1,100 yards from scrimmage. So theoretically, he was headed in the right direction, right? He was actually becoming a little bit more of a bell cow running back, somebody that the Panthers could lean on more. But it wasn't until he got partway through his 4th season when they paid him, and you can see his 4th season pretty easily his most productive. Double-digit touchdowns, almost 1,400 yards from scrimmage, 4.7 yards per touch. Good player. 4.8 yards per carry, which is something that Ken Walker's never done in his career. And he had 4.9 in 2022 on limited carries, granted. So Ken Walker's never quite done that, but the overall production from Chuba Hubbard actually eclipses Ken Walker by just a little bit if you factor in everything, but not by that much. Not really by that much at all. I mean, also let's remember that Walker was a little bit more of a touchdown guy. Hubbard also fumbles a little bit more than Walker. So we're kind of there, I feel like. You go to Pro Football Focus, they thought he was good in 2024, slightly above average, 16th best running back in the league. Year before that, 2023, which was kind of his breakout year, they thought he was really good, but not quite on the level of a Ken Walker. And you go back to 2022, they thought he was a little above average, 21st in the league, good grades though. And his rookie year, they weren't a big fan of him. So granted, he's not getting paid based off what he did in his rookie year, but you look at this and you're like, wait a minute, I think we've kind of gotten there, more or less. I feel like we're there. I mean, I feel like Ken Walker's a better running back and has more name value and will be more intriguing to teams than a guy like a Chuba Hubbard. That's a little bit harder to quantify, but you keep going down the list. You get to a guy like a Miles Sanders who signed his extension 2 years ago. Like we're definitely too far at that point, right? You now you're getting down to like guys who are on rookie deals like Bijan Robinson if you keep going. Got guys like Tony Pollard, who was a free agent when he signed his extension. So, but at the same time was not considered to be a Ken Walker level player. You've got guys like Derrick Henry, who granted was 30 years old when he signed the extension. I kind of feel like you've hit pretty close to the mark with a guy like Chuba Hubbard. If you take everything into consideration, I think you're about there. So what are we talking about here on an extension for Ken Walker based off the market? I would say something around 3 years, 24 million, which is what DeAndre Swift got from the Bears, or maybe 4 years, 36 million, which would be the same average annual value. That's 8 million per year. I think that's probably what you would be looking at if the market determines his value. There are some extenuating circumstances that could drag it down a little bit, like the fact that he's gotten worse with each passing year in terms of raw volume stats. But I don't think we're going much lower than Chuba Hubbard. I could see slightly lower than Chuba Hubbard, but I don't think you're going lower than Tony Pollard or third contract Aaron Jones or Miles Sanders from 2 years ago. So are you doing 3 years, 24 million for Ken Walker? Absolutely not. I don't think so at all. Too many injuries, too many problems. Some people question how good he is. Like, is all the dancing really worth it? Like all the stuff that he does in the backfield that causes him to be such a boomer bust player, is that going to get better? Is that something that he even wants to get better? Do you want to give that long-term money? I don't think so. So for me personally, if it is, if I'm right, and I think, by the way, I'm being kind of conservative at 3 years, 24 million. 8 million per year, I think, is the bottom. But I'm going to need a deal. I'm going to need a pretty significant deal on a Ken Walker extension. I'm going to need to go like 3 years, 18 million for me to even consider it. I think I got to go that low, and I don't know why he would do that. You look at the guys who got about 6 million a year. You got guys like Devin Singletary, who had already been on two different teams when he got this contract from the Giants. Miles Sanders, who got his contract 2 years ago. Like, I don't think that's reasonable, but that's what it would take for me to be on board with a Ken Walker extension. And even then, I'm just barely on board with it. Like, you might need to go down to like 315 for me to truly be in. All right, so complicated topic, but I don't think we're extending Ken Walker. I think you got to let it ride. All right, I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. Let me know what you think.